We see what aggressive external pressure is now being exerted on Russia, on our entire society. Almost the entire arsenal is directed against us: economic, military, political, informational. The most powerful anti-Russian propaganda has been launched. Attacks on our history, culture, spiritual values do not stop. Just like attempts to drive a wedge into harmony, into the brotherhood of the peoples of our country, our opponents have decided that Russia's multinationality is its weak spot. And they are doing everything to divide us. Well, I'll say a few more words about this now. These opponents of ours, which I mentioned, you know this firsthand, arrange provocations within national communities, allegedly, on behalf of the Russian peoples. They create various socio-political associations that represent only themselves and provocateurs like themselves. They brazenly declare the need for the so-called decolonization of Russia. By the way, they speak their own language because they themselves are countries that own colonies, and today they are pursuing a neo-colonial policy. Therefore, they talk about us, thinking about themselves, thinking that we are the same as them. They say that Russia needs to be divided into dozens of small state formations. And it is clear why. In order to then subjugate them to their will, exploit them, use them in their own selfish interests. They have no other goals. The authors of such concepts are accustomed to being guided by Western ideological templates with their racist neo-colonial approaches, with statements about a certain exclusivity of some and inferiority of other peoples, with the habit of dividing peoples into first, second, third grade. But it seems to me that they also have the highest grade there, who consider themselves even superior to their allies. I repeat, they proceeded and continue to proceed from the fact that Russia's cultural and national diversity is our weakness, but life, and you and I know this well, dear friends and colleagues, the challenges we have faced have shown, on the contrary, that this is our strength. This is Russia's special all-conquering strength. The kind, sincere attitude of the peoples of Russia towards each other has been formed over many centuries. Well, of course, in the history of our multinational people for 1,000 years, of course, everything was as it happens in any family, and quarrels, and contradictions. It cannot be otherwise. But this is how the Russian family of peoples gradually took shape over 1,000 years. Our ancestors from generation to generation worked together for the benefit of their common great motherland. With the diversity of their languages and traditions, they multiplied the spiritual heritage of a single state. They formed its unique multinational multi-confessional culture. Our state was built around the values of multinational harmony. This is the most important basis for our consolidation, which is only getting stronger in the face of external aggression and threats. And our opponents that I mentioned, people with neo-colonial thinking, they are really morons. They do not understand that it is this diversity that makes us stronger. And in vain they count on the effect for which they are trying. Well, I already said that people who are guided by their neo-colonial ideas are morons. And in the competition of idiots they would take second place. Why only the second? This is because they are morons. They do not understand that in the conditions of external aggression and external pressure, We are only strengthening our multinational people. It is not by chance that everyone has joined the ranks of participants in a special military operation and the ranks of volunteers who provide assistance to the front and the rear. I want to emphasize this. Almost all the nationalities of Russia have joined. Representatives of more than 100 nationalities of Russia have already received high military awards. Together we are proud of our heroes. Together we support our servicemen in word and deed. And this unity of actions and thoughts of millions of people, of course, makes us stronger and better. There is more trust and mutual assistance in society. Our solidarity has become stronger and more reliable. Our involvement in the fatherland, responsibility for the motherland and for its future has become more conscious and deeper. And I think it's clear why this is happening. This is understandable for every person. Not only for some experts whom we respect very much. Not only for leaders. In this case, the heads of regions. No. A simple person understands that only unity makes us strong and invincible. And this is the main thing. Because our existence depends on it. And that's all. I want to emphasize this. Everyone feels and understands this, both with the mind, and with the soul, and with the heart. That is why in today's situation there is an absolutely obvious consolidation of our society. The level of all Russian civic identity. When a person first of all considers himself a citizen of Russia, and then a representative of a particular nationality, has grown in recent years in direct proportion to the pressure on the country. The more sanctions were taken against us, the more slander there was, the higher this parameter of overall consolidation became. Over the past 5 years, it has grown by a third. And by the beginning of 2023 it exceeded 94%. Objective statistics. The level of common civic identity in 2017 was 63% in Russian society. And in 2022 it was 94.2%. That is, I repeat, the vast majority of people are aware of themselves, first of all, as citizens of the country. They put in the first place their belonging and involvement in Russian society, in the state, and not in a certain ethnic group. The amendments to the constitution, developed, including with your participation, dear colleagues, secured the protection of the cultural identity of all the peoples of Russia, the preservation of its linguistic and ethno-cultural diversity, and it is important that all this is based on the same values and foundations for all, on the firm conviction that we are different, of course. We are different people. And each of us has our own beloved small homeland. But a single, powerful, huge fatherland, behind which we feel like behind a stone wall. We have one. This is Russia. With its great diverse culture, great history, and with linguistic diversity, and with the great Russian language, which is enshrined in Article 68 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation as a state language, and which performs a unique function as a language of interethnic communication. This is what I would like to draw attention to in the course of adjusting the provisions of the national policy strategy. I ask the government, together with the members of the council, with relevant experts, to link all the activities of the strategy, taking into account the tasks of strengthening the all-Russian civic identity. Another important area is migration. Given its impact on the level and quality of interethnic relations in the country, of course, there are a lot of problems here. We understand this very well and we see all these problems. Of course, there are many problems. Now I will not list them. Each of them is of particular value and is extremely sharp. But here, too, Our so-called opponents are trying to hinder us, to create additional problems. Strange, you know. When I look at this, I wonder. They themselves have problems through the roof. They don't handle it completely, absolutely. People who come to them and live on the territory of their countries do not feel like citizens of these states. They live there for years and do not speak the local language. It's just amazing, but it's a fact. A fact. However, they also try to create problems for us. They are trying to pick something with a poker in order to exacerbate the problems that really exist, but we understand that there are problems, we know what needs to be done, and despite the complexity of these problems, you need to constantly work on their solution. Based on the results of the Collegium of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, held in March, a special interdepartmental working group was created. In a month and a half, it will submit proposals to address a number of pressing issues. They should also be reflected in the strategy and, above all, in terms of a comprehensive system of socio-cultural adaptation of foreign citizens. I want to say that it is easier for us than in other countries of the world. It is difficult. But it is easier for us to work in this area because, after all, migrants and immigrants are mostly people from the former republics of the Soviet Union. There is also a level of knowledge of the language and an understanding of Russian culture is present. Our task is to work on distant approaches, to work directly in those countries where the main migration flow comes from. Well, we'll talk about that. And the main thing I want to note is that the leadership of these countries is also ready for this joint work together with us. We are talking about opening Russian schools. We are talking about working closer with our public organizations, with the national associations of Russia, and here we have many opportunities to solve this problem effectively enough. In migration policy, we must proceed, first of all, from the interests, of course, of our citizens in matters of security, in the social sphere, and in the labor market. A flexible, balanced approach is very important here, which does not create risks for us, but works for the development of the country, for the country's economy. We are open to specialists who are needed by the domestic economy and, of course, first of all to our compatriots, to people who are close to us in culture, language, and religion, for those who, against their will, for example, overnight in 1991 suddenly found themselves outside the borders of one large, once united country, but who have always considered and continue to consider Russia their historical homeland. An unconditional requirement for everyone who comes to Russia to work and study is respect for our traditions, observance of the norms and rules of Russian society, and, of course, here the regional aspect is also very important. Where the migrant comes, to Moscow, or to the North Caucasus, or somewhere else, well, you need to know the all-Russian rules and regulations, and the rules of those regions where a person comes, necessarily. The national policy strategy, of course, should also include adjustments related to the entry of new subjects of the Federation into Russia. Kherson region, Zaporozhye, Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, like other regions, are also multinational in their composition. In addition to Russians and Ukrainians, Belarusians, Greeks, Tatars, Armenians, Jews, and representatives of other nations live there. They have experienced all the consequences of aggressive nationalism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, the policy pursued by the regime that seized power in Kiev as a result of an armed coup in 2014. Of course, there were elections later, all this we know and hear, but the primary source of power in Kiev is a coup. We do not forget about this either, and we will not forget.